Three, 2, 1, kaboom! Hello everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Starting the Wave podcast. I'm your host, Matt, and it's a real pleasure and privilege to be here to try and help and to make this podcast to try and really give you what you want. Oh no, let's start that again. Hey, young man, you're not annoying. And don't forget, you're not a young man, you're the team. You guys are one being. You can just chill, man. You're not even involved. Yeah, I'm a chief, cuz I like to be respected as it. Do you respect me as the chief? Sweet. All right, 3, 2, 1, kaboom! Hello everyone, and welcome to the Starting the Wave podcast. I'm your host, Matt, and it's a real pleasure to be here to host this experience, to try and use kind of a lot of the knowledge and study I've done over the past couple of decades of my life to really try and help you understand this real crisis and emergency situation that we've found ourselves in. Obviously, everyone can look at anywhere in the world right now where they get their news and just see that the world is in this crisis that seems to be getting worse. There seem to be these massive problems that we're either not working on enough or maybe not even working on at all. And then there's this really deep feeling of powerlessness in the world, and a lot of people feeling like they've lost their power. And there's this big feelings of confusion and big feelings of overwhelm with the state of the world. And that's so fair enough, you know what I mean? It's a massive problem that we find ourselves in, and obviously the solution won't come from any one person, it will come from a bunch of different people. But there are a lot of people in the world, and a lot of people I know who I really think could benefit from just some accurate knowledge and stories and understanding that are just like have receipts the whole way through, and you can go and have a look at the sources yourself to really help you try and wrap your head around this concept, this idea of like, well, how did the world get set on fire? But also, like, why are we so close to World War III? Like, what is going on here? Because the world was actually quite crazy before the climate crisis was here. Just not that many people, I think, have been given the opportunity to really start to see, you know, if you pay attention to what was left out of your history education in high school, and most people quit history in high school, let alone by the time they get to university, barely anyone continues to go into the history department and then become whatever type of expert you suspect. You know, you can become inside of the history department. There's actually not that many people who have taken the time, I think, to answer the question as like, all right, without being weird about it, from the Big Bang till now, isn't that all of history? Like, why is there this split between modern history and ancient history? Like, that's one of the most important questions from my perspective for you to ask yourself if you want to understand how the world got set on fire, how big business came to be and got the power that they have, who is ultimately benefiting from this world. Because from my perspective, and just I guess the way I've learned to look at this situation, there are people who are benefiting from the world being this broken. And if you can look at this world from their perspective and train yourself to be able to see how those people have, I guess, created this situation, from my perspective, I think the solution and what you can start doing about it, and you can get a real sense of power and meaning and purpose in your day-to-day life, in how you show up and how you take action. I think the solution becomes very obvious. So thanks for watching the second episode. Yeah, if you've watched the first one, it's cool that you're back. Hello again. It's cool to see you. And yeah, thanks for even more of your time and or your space, your experience in this world. Yeah, just thanks for giving me the opportunity to try and make this argument to you that no, there is this way to look at the world and look at this Armageddon crisis that we're in and actually manage your anxiety through being a part of the solution, being able to see, okay, cool, like there's a lot more playing out here than meets the eye, and a bunch of weird dudes on their yachts who boast the most and think they're the toast of the toast, like those guys as they travel from coast to coast, like they're not gonna kill the earth. Like, yeah, the Big Bang didn't happen, and it hasn't been all these billions of years of stuff to happen just so some weird dudes who eat too much caviar can, like, yeah, be on their jet skis and stuff. That's not, there's so much more that's at play here and so much more that's going to play out. So yeah, I really want to give you a place of confidence in your life where there's at least one person in your life who is wholly convicted that human beings are going to be victorious. Yeah, and big business ain't going to wipe us out. So thanks so much for being here. Now, I can't recap every single time we do one of these episodes, because if I do that, we're just going to be in this endless cycle of recaps, because I'm going to try and teach you and show you so much each episode that if we have to recap it every time, it's just the whole episode will be a recap. So I'll try and give you a little bit to remind you, but again, you might just want to listen to the first episode again, because these next 5 episodes are all in a block. And they're all about helping us understand these stories, these Trojan horses. I want you to think about a Trojan horse like a gift, right? You think, oh, this is awesome. You bring it into the city, and then some stuff happens, and then what's actually inside the gift destroys the city. It's there are these stories and cultural fables that people are really, really attached to, like Star Wars. I'm May the 4th. I love May the 4th. Do you love May the 4th? And I don't think enough people who love Star Wars seriously consider whether or not they're assisting big business in destroying the world because of the Overton window that is created by the stories that sit roughly within the world that we call sci-fi. And there's a lot of people who just want to have a teenage or a little person's understanding of this world, and they don't want to ask questions about how this world has come to be. They don't want to ask questions about the Nobel Prize and big oil. And they definitely don't want to have to go to sleep at night with the knowledge that big oil created the Nobel Prize. And if you don't know that already, that's fine. You can just go check the facts. We're gonna do a whole episode on that geezer in season 1, and I'm going to show you, science is not what you have been led to believe it is. And you can have an understanding of science from a kid in high school, or you can have the understanding of science as an adult. And just because you've won a Nobel Prize does not mean you have the understanding of science as an adult, because I couldn't imagine what it would be like to go to sleep at night having taken, again, let's just assume it was just me in the research and I didn't have to split it with the 2 other people, because there's a maximum of 3 you can split that prize with, even though sometimes it's 30 or 40 people who work on the paper, but don't worry about any of that. Let's just say I win it for myself. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to go to sleep at night having bent the knee to the people who ultimately in the class of people who benefited the most from the climate crisis, benefited the most from the invention of the university, and benefited the most from the invention of the big business. And once you have a good enough understanding of history that you can realize, no, there's a genuine argument you can make that the people who've benefited the most from the world being set on fire, the people who've benefited the most from the invention of the university, that these people are the same people, the same family unit. What do we do in that situation? Right, think about it. Universities, big business, one of the people the family who've profited the most from the invention of big business, the most from the invention of the university, and the most from the invention of the climate crisis is which family? And if you can't see that yet, well, that's why this Armageddon anxiety toolkit exists, because all we've got to do to help the world change is get a very finite amount of human beings to change their minds. I would argue there's about 50,000 families that are kind of responsible for the world that we're in right now. And if you want to boil it down at any time, we just got to get 3 people to change their mind and we can change the whole world. We'll talk about that towards the end. So what I'm here to do with this podcast is challenge some of these narratives inside of your life that are actually unchallenged and you think are very strong and very powerful, when in actual fact, you've just never really heard an effective counter argument. And what I'm going to persistently and consistently do over this first, this first season, but also all 3 of the first seasons, is show you ideas that are going to be outside your Overton window. So I'm hopefully reliably going to consistently show you ideas you've never heard of before, and I'm going to try and present them to you in a strategic manner to show you the Trojan horses and the viruses and the malware that big business puts in all of our minds that make us feel powerless and confused. Right? Again, think about a virus on your computer. right? It's like you look at your computer and you're trying to run your internet. There's so many tabs open, but for some reason the tabs aren't working very good, and you don't really know why. And then you go into your programs and you see, oh, there's this program taking all of this energy up. It's actually not doing anything to help me. It's just helping someone else with their goals. Well, that's what these idea of aliens is, and that's what I want to try and present to you today. Because if I can show you your Overton window and start to show you these literal structures inside your mind, you'll have noticed big business have created. Once you start to dismantle them, and I can show you how to dismantle them, you could just literally dismantle the kind of structures of big business in your life. It's really awesome. So yeah, you're not going to be like, we're not going to be tricked. You know what I mean? You're not confused. You're not powerless. Big business has made this world so that the obvious seems illogical and the illogical seems obvious. Right? And that's what we want to work on. We want to work on our definitions of logic and really recapture what it means to like have a future and a vision that we all agree on. And that's what I want to do. Again, it's only the second episode, and I'm going to present you with a future, once we take aliens off the table, that hopefully will stun you, and something that you're just going to ask the question for the rest of your life. You know, why didn't they teach me this in kindergarten? You know, like why didn't my teacher, my science teachers in year 8, why didn't they sit me down and teach me about this? When I went to university and I got my PhD, why did no one talk about this future? When I won my Nobel Prize and I gave my speech, why didn't I talk about this future? We should all be uniting behind this one vision we should all be getting behind. Instead, we're talking about this, from my perspective, utterly daft stuff like aliens and AI. Now, these are not innocent kid stories. All of the time, energy, and effort we're spending on aliens and AI, and there's more, by the way, but I got to make the argument with aliens and AI to really show you that these ideas are not scientific. These ideas have zero science underneath them. I'm not trying to argue, by the way, that code doesn't exist. So don't go that way. What I'm trying to say is the idea that the computer code that uses the internet, like all the other computer code that we call AI, is not artificial intelligence, and it's certainly not going to turn into AGI. That's daft. Okay, that's super daft. There's no difference between thinking your computer's going to become intelligent and your table's going to walk up and become intelligent. Even though your table might be intelligent already, who knows? Right, I mean, so we're going to deal with AI next week, right? But this week we're going to deal with aliens. And between the two of them, I'm going to show you in both worlds how they're unscientific ideas that are just made up by like pseudoscientific, woo-woo believing, daft, teenagers in the body of 45-year-old Western men and trained by universities, which are actually thinkeries. And once you're able to see, oh, okay, cool, like these are just ideas made up by a bunch of kind of cuckoo people who don't have any grounding in science. And once we show you that with science, what you're going to be able to do is to see why big business inject these particular viruses into our culture. Why is Disney obsessed with telling us stories about aliens and telling us stories where in that stories with aliens, there's AI? Like if you go down to the most highest selling movies of all time, why is there so much AI and aliens in those movies? Right? Because again, what I want to offer to you is the counter argument to aliens is not, no, we're the only ones that are here. The counter argument to aliens is, why are we telling the story of aliens if aliens are not real? Because if aliens are not real, they're just like the Teletubbies. Right? And obviously, if someone was at the dinner table and was like, yeah, my research is I just went to Harvard and I got a big ass grant to go try and search for some Teletubbies. Hopefully, you would be like, all right, guy, as if you actually go to Harvard. But then that same person could just change the word Teletubby for aliens, which again is just another character from a fictional group of stories made up by a bunch of people. All good cuz. Yeah, apparently you understand physics or whatever. So what I really want to do is to show you, I'm going to show you a little bit of it in this one, but then I'm going to show you all of it in the next one. Well, the first part of all of it. Because if I just make the argument right now until we've done both the aliens and the AI arguments, it's not going to make sense. So what I want to offer to you today, and this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to test it, is you could never start from scratch. You could never, what I mean when I say that, is go in front of like a panel of scientists, like all 7 Nobel Prize winners or PhD, like whatever it's got to be, and they don't know anything about aliens and they don't know anything about AI. And you have to start from scratch and argue some scientists who haven't seen any stories about AI or aliens, so they don't have any a priori knowledge. And you, young buck, you've got to stand up, and there's 7 Nobel Prize winners in front of you, and you've got to argue to them, and they don't have any knowledge of aliens or of AI. You've got to argue to them that you deserve a research grant to study. And that's what we're going to do. Like, we're going to literally do this exercise and a little bit in this podcast episode. We're going to do the same thing for AI. It's like, it's so daft. There's just so many people in the world who just don't want to have to ask questions. Don't want to have to think too hard about life. Think about the billions of not only dollars, but hours that human beings right now are spending on something to do with aliens and going into space, and something to do with AI and computer code. That's what I mean. Oh, it feels like that's cool. It feels like you guys started to get that then. So imagine if, like, the human beings, we have all these tabs open in our, like, group culture. A bunch of the tabs are definitely been money and billions of hours and kids' dreams, like waking up, oh, I really want to, like, it's all been taken up by these stories, this story about aliens and this story about AI. And what if they're not what if we need to be spending all that time, all that energy, and all that money on something that's actually going to solve our problems? And what if we've been led on these wild goose chases, with all due respect to the gooses? I don't know why we're chasing the gooses either, right? Like, what's going on? You're like, and hopefully you're going to be able to see it, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it's magic once you see it, because it's so cool. All right. So it's so important. I want you to keep asking the question, either aliens are real, or why the hell are we even talking about the fact that they're real? There's no gray zone. There's no way where they're half real. There's no way where we could just find half a leg of an alien on a planet. You know what I mean? They're either wholly real or they're wholly made up. And so the question is, if they are made up, why are we spending so much time, energy, effort, money? And once you understand, like, a lot of tax dollars goes into some of this research. A lot of good people's money. A lot of your money's been spent if you've ever paid tax. Oh, all right. So, why believing in aliens means you're bad at science? That is the core claim at the top of this podcast, episode. And what I want to do is, like, to test it. And this is just a black and white statement. If we can just define science, I don't think we need to go anywhere further, because this could just be a black and white statement. We don't even need to define bad. You know what I mean? We can just all just trust with everything else there and just focus on this word science. And either we can define our word science and get to good or bad, or we can't, you know what I mean? And that's what I want to do. So what I want to offer to you is, again, most people's first step in the aliens argument, if they ever want to seriously have it, is usually an argument from authority. And it's really important to understand, like, all the Nobel Prize winners in the world, everyone who works at SETI, that's a search for extraterrestrial intelligence, which is basically a bunch of people who've made this a number of daft a priori assumptions, one of which being, well, they better communicate with electromagnetic signals. Anyway, don't worry about them. NASA, who you're going to learn so much cool shit about in the next couple of podcast seasons. Gosh, there's some stories about NASA that get left out of the history classroom. All the people at Harvard. The second last episode of this podcast season is going to be on the thinkery that is Harvard, and teach you about some of the real crazy stuff that the people who work at that franchise get up to. Plus, like, we've got things like the Drake equation. Yeah, put some fancy words around some fancy math. Yeah, so we've got the Drake equation, and then they just say some daft stuff like, and then there's so many Earth-like planets in the universe. It's like, well, yeah, none of that is science. I don't really care about your rather daft arguments from probability based on a bunch of a priori assumptions which are a vote. I want to understand what you understand science is, so we can have an honest conversation about whether or not believing in aliens, or that aliens are even probable, or that we should even be talking about aliens, investing in aliens, or that people who believe in aliens are doing anything else other than believing in woo-woo, cuckoo, pseudo-scientific whack shit, then that's okay, you're just bad at science. That's the claim. Okay, so that's just what we've got to keep focusing on, just whether or not you're bad at science or not, okay? So I think another bunch of people, when we get to this conversation, they just don't want to live in a world where all of those people will just believe in some made up shit. And they just think, like, there's no way we could be that stupid and daft to believe in a bunch of stories that could arguably just be made up to scare kids in the dark. Like, there's no way it could just be made up. Like, there's no way we're just tasting the Teletubbies, but who are just green and have their own spaceships. Is there a green Teletubby? I'm not actually sure. Sorry to the creators of the Teletubbies. So there's no way we could be that stupid because we're in the modern age. Yeah, we're modern and we're not that stupid. And what I want to do is to offer to you the idea that, no, this exact thing we're talking about is you thinking real daft ideas are scientific or even scientifically testable. Scientists who are way better than you have believed in this idea. Not believed in this idea, believed in ideas like this. And then as science has progressed, we've looked on them back in the past and believed, oh, wow, that person thought a bunch of cool shit about science, but wow, they thought a bunch of real daft shit about science. And the best example of this, of a scientist who's definitely better than you, whoever you are listening to this podcast, at science, is of course Sir Isaac Newton, or as I like to call him, the Zachatron. All right, if you don't know who Sir Isaac Newton is, we're going to just play a small clip now of someone else. Just a brief 1-minute clip giving you a bit of an intro to this guy.
Who do you think is the most extraordinary scientific mind?
There is no contest, Isaac Newton. Nobody comes close.
Explain what?
He, working alone, discovers the laws of motion. Then he discovers the law of gravity, universal law of gravitation. And then someone asked Ike, or I don't know what they call him, Ike, why do your planets orbit in this shape, ellipses, rather than perfect circles? He said, I don't know, I'll get back to you. And he goes home, and he comes back, I finally have my answer. And so, well, Isaac, how did you do that? Well, I had to invent integral and differential calculus to answer that question. He then discovers the laws of optics, deducing that white light is composed of colors, because you could take those same colors, recombine them, and get white light, which freaked out artists of the day. So he does all of this. Then he turns 26.
Who do you think is the most...
All right. Thanks, Mr. Dr. Neil Man guy. Thanks. Yeah, so... Ooh! Look at his resume. Art should be real intimidated, this guy, hey. All right, let's talk about some facts about this geezer. All right, so that's how good he is. He is unquestionably the greatest scientific... Again, you just heard it, bro. That's unquestionably the greatest mind in science. You know, he's at least on the Mount Rushmore, you know what I mean? On every Mount Rushmore, this guy of science, he's on there. And it's really important to understand how much this exact thing we're talking about, people thinking that their things are scientifically testable just because a lot of scientists believe in them and working on them, but aren't actually real. And future generations are just going to think it's real daft that you thought that that's how the world worked. And there's no reason that they're not going to do that, future generations, looking at our obsession with aliens. And that's the argument. It's like, okay, well, if Sir Isaac Newton, arguably the greatest mind in all of science has ever lived, thought a bunch of daft shit about the world. Here's some daft things that he legitimately believed about the world and we can source. Like, this isn't me making some stuff up, we can source. First of all, if you get a cold, what you should do, the ultimate cure, you should go get a toad, not a joke, hang it upside down in your chimney, not a joke, wait for it to puke and die, and then everything that it's puked up, particularly all the earth and the worms and stuff that it's been eating, mash all of that up, and then like put it in a lozenge jar and wear it as wear it. He thought plagues happened, like Black Death, and he had to leave the city and stuff. The reason, like the going thing of his day was that, you know, plagues happen because of bad smell, bad air. Yeah, not germs, bad air. He also believed wholeheartedly and try wholeheartedly, just like all you scientists out there trying to you call yourself scientists, but all you cultural fable chasers, yeah, all you hallucination trying to grabbers or whatever you're doing out there, believing all your daft stuff, being daft punks. How do you know his pursuit of trying to turn lead into gold isn't just your pursuit of trying to find aliens? Because he wrote literally more than 2,000 pages and over 1 million words on his pursuit of trying to turn lead into gold. This guy was obsessed with gold. The last podcast episode of this season is going to be about this geezer. This guy's such a freaking geezer. I can't wait to teach you about why he is. And he was utterly obsessed with gold. And just remember this when we go back to the final podcast episode. He also almost certainly gave himself a nervous breakdown. Yeah, really curious thing, because he was just obsessed with mercury. He was regularly tasting his own experiments and stuff, constantly trying to turn lead into gold. And they analyzed his hair and found 40 times more lead, sorry, mercury, not lead, than normal, and a whole bunch of heavy metals as well. And if you actually look at the symptoms for mercury poisoning and you look at what happened to Newton later in his life, some things add up. So yeah, the greatest mind in all of science chased some daft shit like turning lead into gold to the point that he poisoned himself. Metaphor. What is the definition of a metaphor? Who knows? All right, so if this happened to Sir Isaac, the Zachatron, yeah. If this happened to the Zachatron himself, why not all the people like at Harvard, like at that thinkery, you know what I mean? Like, why not all the people at SETI and all the people in the world who, like, again, you can't just make this argument of, like, well, there's a whole bunch of smart folk who believe in it, so it must be real or something. Well, no, because he's smarter than all those smart folk. He 1v1 beats all them, and he believes in some real daft shit. So why can't the same thing be happening today? And of course, the answer is it can, because like, literally they named Force after him, okay? I don't care what your H score or whatever it is. He named Force after him. And even though he never won any Nobel Prizes, that's just because he lived before big oil dug enough stuff up out of the ground, because of course big oil is just big mining. Oil is something you mine out of the ground, before big mining figured out the Nobel Prize. But yeah, if he was alive when they had Nobel Prizes, he would have won a bunch of them. Okay, so what if, and here's just this core, I guess, thing to start to chew on, right? I'm just trying to like present the first piece to start to walk across this, because for some of you, this might be the first time you've ever been exposed to this argument. That, the whole argument about aliens is just an Overton window distractor. It's just a binding conversation and cultural piece of like malware or virus created by big business to stop us speaking about the truth. And there are tons of people out there who have this perspective on sci-fi, that sci-fi is this very sophisticated creation of big business that's really designed to distract the youth and distract the nerds from the true story of the history of this place here of planet Earth. And so what if aliens and AI and AGI, and again, we're going to do that next week. We're going to have the same conversation. Well, not next week, next podcast episode. It might be in the next hour for you, whenever it comes out. Are just the modern day versions of this for scientists, right? So what if in 500 years, scientists are looking at people today and laughing at how stupid and silly the idea of aliens were, just like we can maybe not laugh because it would have sucked for him, but like, man, it sucked that that guy was literally putting toad vomit on his body and yeah, doing a bunch of pretty daft stuff. So why are we chasing these fables dressed up as science? Now, I'd like to do a little bonus as well and have a little bonus part of this episode and just a little test for you as a nerd. Because if I was in the audience when that Mr. Dr. Neilman said that out loud, I would have put up my hand. And even if it's not in the place where the Q&A is yet, I might have just started yelling out. I might have just been like, excuse me, Mr. Neilman, there's some things I think about Zachatron that you either know but choose not to say out loud, or you just don't know enough about history and science to know these facts about his life. Can we just have a conversation? Why was he such an evil or rich man? And why did you say nothing about his contributions to getting onto the gold standard? Why did you say nothing about how much gold he made? I mean, Newton died the richest of any of the people who were on the Mount Rushmore of scientists. Where did he get his money from? He died with roughly, in today's dollars, tens of millions of dollars in the bank account. Had so much money that his chamber pots, his toilets, were made of silver. He literally shat in a silver pot. I'm not joking. I will source all of this for you in the episode for you that's fully on this guy. Sorry, just to Mr. Dr. Neilman, can we talk about some of the shit that he did after he was 26? Like, what about those 28 people? What 28 people? Really? That's it. That's what you're going to say about that guy. Nothing about the money. Neil, have you followed the money? Mr. Dr. Neilman, how did he make his millions? I want to have so many conversations with you. The coin he is most associated with. What is interesting about the name of that coin? Why is he associated with coins? And definitely don't ask why the artillery manuals of the day were updated after his laws of motion were released. Yeah, don't worry about that. And just while we're here, you're not allowed to go on the internet to answer this, and I don't need to ask this to Neil anymore. This is just all the science, math people in the world who think they understand science and math because they went to a franchise called Stanford and bought a product called a PhD, and then they paid to publish. Woohoo! So like, why do we all have to study quadratic equations? And again, you're not allowed to go on the internet to ask this like question. Just like stone cold, just you and me. Why do we learn quadratic equations in high school? Again, if you're like me, pretty much most of math till like year 6 or 7 was just calculated times tables, yeah. And then all of a sudden algebra showed up. I was like, what the hell? There's letters in math. And then all of a sudden we're doing quadratic equations. Do your quadratic equations. Shut up, do your quadratic equations. Okay, so what is the most common use of the mathematics inside of the quadratic equation in the real world? And I hope you know that the answer is, of course, artillery. Sir Isaac Newton helped the cannons get better? Quadratic equations to help people get better at artillery? What is the difference between rocket science and bomb science or artillery science? And why is our culture arranged in such a way that the saying is, it's not rocket science? As in saying whatever you're working on isn't as hard as rocket science, because rocket science is the hardest thing that anyone could think of doing. I hope you know the answer to that question. Here's another one. Why are so many streets and buildings on NASA property named after Nazis? If you don't know that answer, if you don't know the answer to that question, you definitely don't understand the history of this world. I don't want to be disrespectful to you, but like, really? You think you understand science? You want to work at NASA? NASA, the place that employed all them Nazis? Damn. Anyway, shut up. Shut up. Isaac Newton, he's the greatest mind ever. Don't talk about him in gold. And let's not talk about the Nazis and the rockets. Let's talk about aliens. Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about aliens. Okay, so let's get to this claim. Okay, believing in aliens makes you bad at science. So to really, really test that claim to get to a black and white on and off, is that true or not? We got to define what science is. And I'm going to give you obviously my perspective on what science is, and then you can test it against your understanding of science and you can decide your own opinion, and then we can both go to sleep at night deciding whatever we want about reality. And we will just live with the consequences of those decisions. So I'm making such a specific claim, okay? As like an artist, I'm trying to claim that like, nah, just because you say some fancy words out loud and shake the Drake equation in my face, shake it all about, you use the Drake equation and it doesn't work. All right, so if I ask you what makes science, if you, for me, say peer review papers or publishing, from my perspective, you should be kicked out of the classroom and you're not invited back. Yeah, because to all you folk, I just re-raise you the replication crisis and you're dismissed. See you later, champ. All right, next, some people like saying physics or the laws of physics. Again, from my perspective, those people dismissed out of the classroom. For everyone in the world who believes the laws of physics are doing a really good job, just go double click in QFT and explain to me why the axiom of choice is called renormalization. Yeah, I know those two things you have to choose to get to QFT, champ. So yeah, we dismiss that because if you're not going to talk about that, I don't think you can call yourself a physicist. And then you might also give the answer if the thing that makes science is something to do with like experiments. Now, you're still going to get kicked out of the classroom if you say that, but you're allowed to stand outside the door and you can keep listening and you're going to be allowed back in. So here's from my perspective what makes science science. There's only two answers to this question. Now we can play around with the words here, we can play around with some of the concepts here, but the core crux is these two arguments, okay? So the first argument of what makes science science is of course falsifiability, replication, and the null hypothesis. From my perspective, those three ideas are the toolkit you would need to teach a human being to then figure out whatever aspect of reality you want to try and understand, the cause and effect that we can then represent in the quote unquote laws of science or whatever. That's what's going to create it. Falsifiability, the ability to test whether or not your idea is a story or not. We have to have some way we can test it. We have to have a black and white on or off. Does this exist? Yes or not. And it's not just one person who has to be able to run that test. Anyone, anywhere around the world has to be able to replicate that test. It's not just one person, one researcher who gets to say that they have the truth. They have to be able to teach that truth to a bunch of other researchers who can then replicate that same on-off test, falsification, that same experiment. And we also have to be so careful to use the null hypothesis, because once you understand the null hypothesis, which is this idea that we can test for things that we can't take photos of or can't measure, we can just measure their effects. If we can make a powerful enough argument about cause and effect, we can test that against random chance. If all of that didn't make sense, that's okay. It will make sense over time because we're going to return to these ideas a lot over the next couple of seasons. But it's just from my perspective, I was going to make a real technical definition of science that I was then happy to back up and like generate. It would start with these three ideas. I really think they're the like, you know, triangle underneath them all. But again, remember I said there's two correct answers for me. This is the first, and then the second one. And if you're not willing to have this argument, again, for me, you have a teenager and a little person. Like you have a little child's understanding of science. You don't have an adult understanding of how the subject of science came to be, which families invented it, and for what purpose. Because obviously, what makes science science is just whatever the hell human beings say it is. And just so you can understand the importance of this argument, it's really important to understand the difference between the map of reality, that is science, and actual reality itself. Okay? So science, the knowledge of science, or the laws of science, or whatever it is, that's like a GPS system. It is a map that you can use if you want to move through the world, right? And it's going to help you make sense of the world and be able to travel and do things in the world that you couldn't without the map. That's why the map is helpful. But it's really important to understand the map and reality are very, very different. Okay, they're not the same thing. Science and the laws of science and the actual thing that they're describing, like the electrons, they're very, very different things. Okay? And you have to ask yourself a question. Does it make sense to try and make a map that as you make the map, you have to destroy reality to create the map? I don't think that makes sense, but that's fine. That might just be me. So, what I say and what I mean when I'm making this argument is like tomorrow, all the people who wake up and run science, all the Nobel Prize winning people and all the PhD people could have a vote, and just like they kicked Pluto out of the planets, they could rename the subject of science, and they could rename science pseudoscience and rename science pseudoscience. And right now we could be having a conversation about the pseudoscientific method and about how the universities and the PhD winners of the world are the people who are the best at the pseudoscientific method. And then all the people who don't understand science, like all the artists in the world, who don't understand pseudoscience, all those people in the world, yeah, they're the scientists. And everything would stay the same. We could change the subject name of science to art. And you'd have to be able to make the same arguments. Okay, let me go one step deeper with this. We could redefine a subject. We could leave science as it is, but just redefine how we teach all of the different subjects and just teach one subject, the earth, reality, the world, and just have all these different methodologies and methods of human intelligence we can use to figure out truth inside of this world. The scientific toolkit just being one of those tools. We could, at any moment, rearrange the periodic table. We could change all the words, rearrange the structure, put it out of order, and just teach kids that as the periodic table. And of course, the elements aren't going to change. I hope you understand at any moment we can change the electron from positive to negative and nothing's going to change. Because we're just changing our map. The electron isn't positive or negative. The electron's just the electron. It's not even called the electron. That's just a sound wave we use to put a box around a part of reality. So important to understand this. Right? We could change the name of the atom's parts. We could change the name of the electron to the positron and change the name of the positron to the electron. And reality's not going to change. The world's not going to change. Everything will keep functioning. Because science is a map built and made by people. And just to help you understand this, that science comes from people and really people's imaginations, here are three pretty famous sciencey, mathy people. So first guy in the middle is a guy called Leo the hero. And he was really famous in math. He figured out so much stuff in math that there's a Wikipedia article about how many things that are named after him. And he was so prolific as a mathematician, he published more papers after his death because they just had like a backlog of his writing than most mathematicians do in their lifetime, which is pretty hilarious. Now, quite famously, this guy about halfway through his life, this brilliant mathematician, arguably the best mathematician of all time, definitely on the Mount Rushmore of math people, he quite famously went blind during his lifetime. And he kept doing math. I think some people maybe argue he got better at math. I'm not sure about that myself. I haven't looked into it enough. But obviously when he got blind doing math, the way he continued to do math was he'd sit in his bed and he'd had these, I think, 5 or 6 sons. Don't quote me on the exact amount of sons. And he would basically talk to them about math. And so how was he doing mathematics? Unless he was just using anything else but his imagination. In the same way when I ask you, hey, can you just imagine a red sphere in your mind's eye? And you can see a red sphere inside your mind's eye. That place, yeah, he's just using that to do math. Again, like, he had to just have been doing something in his imagination to discover that new math to then say it to everyone because he wasn't even writing anything down. Okay, next to him it's like Stephen Hawking. Like obviously Stephen Hawking figured out some pretty important shit to do with black holes and information. And how did he figure any of that out unless the only tool he could use was his imagination? Because again, his body couldn't even function without the assistance of devices. So where did the knowledge of black holes come from? Unless it literally just came from someone using their imagination. Like, we're just going to talk more about this. Again, Albert Einstein, he uses the term thought experiment because if he just says imagination experiment, everyone gets more uncomfortable. And then, of course, Paul Dirac, this guy here on the left, he quite famously figured out a fair bit of stuff in the universe, and he was just in his room doing math every single day. He was just sitting in his room doing equations every day for like 12 hours a day, not as a joke. And that's how he figured out his thing. He was just doing math and it popped out. So as he was sitting there writing his stuff, just like when you were doing your quadratic equations in school, and inside of him you can feel, he's like, oh, then does it go here? And that's where all this knowledge comes from. So science is not a neutral toolkit. It was made by people, invented for a very specific subject, and it's not a neutral subject. You can argue the method might be if you want, but it's only as good as what you're allowed to test. And they always leave the true purpose of science out of school. It's completely buried. And it's so buried because the overwhelming majority of people in science, if they knew the true purpose of science in this world, they wouldn't be scientists from my perspective, or they'd at least demand so much change that we wouldn't have a replication crisis, which is just the most embarrassing thing ever for any scientist who thinks that they're a scientist. It's buried. There's a reason why the replication crisis happens. Right? Science has, from my perspective, historically been terrible. If you were to give me the chance to grade science as an A to F as a subject compared to its own potential, for me, I'd give it an F. And anyone who doesn't know how historically terrible science has been at accepting new science, go look into the germ theory of disease and calculate roughly how many millions of people died because of the repression of that knowledge because they just didn't want to change their mind about miasma theory. What about Albert's whole shindig and war against quantum mechanics? Well, we're just not going to talk about that? We're just not going to talk about how he could have made a prediction that the universe was expanding and accelerating in its expansion if he just had trusted his math? It's like there's this world of what the people who work in science and like the big business institution that is science, the scientific journals that publish papers, the 3 biggest one of them are all billion-dollar companies. Like, scientific publishing is a billion-dollar enterprise. Like, these are giant big businesses. And what they want you to think versus where science is actually up to in its pursuit of knowledge are radically different, right? Here's what science wants you to think. Look at our fancy photos. Yeah. We found the Higgs boson. Yeah. Don't talk about the fact that we didn't find supersymmetry. Don't talk about the fact that string theory is untestable. Yeah, we found the Higgs. Give someone a Nobel Prize. Woohoo. Why are we giving people in AI prizes in physics? Is it because we don't have anything to talk about in physics because everyone doesn't know what they're doing? And please don't ask about the replication crisis. Like, look at how good science is doing. Antibiotics and vaccines, yeah, and antibiotics and vaccines are great, and I'm very happy for antibiotics and vaccines, but also like, really? We're not going to have just an honest conversation about the big oil and the founding principles that big oil have put into so much of science? We're not going to follow any of that money. We're not going to ask questions about the bond that they use to pay out the Nobel. They're not going to talk about any of that. Okay, cool. Are we not killing the world with science? Like, if we went back in history and turned science back off, does not the climate crisis go away? The ability to fight wars that would ever threaten the total, us as to speak, And just so you know, like 100 years ago, a lot of people thought that science was pretty much done. So Planck, who's someone who's better at science than you, the person who taught him, his teacher, told him about 100 years ago that physics is so highly developed, it's almost fully mature as a science. Now that the discovery of his energy has been crowned, we will soon have assumed its final stable form. There might still be a speck or a dust or a bubble in one corner or another to be examined and classified, but the system as a whole stands firmly in place. The theoretical physics is noticeably approaching the degree of perfection that geometry, for example, has possessed for centuries. Again, another famous guy, Albert A. Michelson. The more important fundamental laws and facts of physical science have all been discovered. And these are now so firmly established that the possibility of them ever being supplanted in the consequence of new discoveries is exceedingly remote. But literally 100 years ago, there's a bunch of people in the world, a bunch of physicists in the world, and again, there was people who didn't think this, but there was a bunch of physicists who did, that we were done, that physics was all good, and we were at 100 out of 100 of the exam. Because that's what I want to ask you. If science was a kid in class, and you had to give them a grade, 0 to 100, how much of the knowledge that you can figure out scientifically have you figured out? What would you give them? And just so you know, tons of physicists are giving themselves higher 90s or 100. And it's so important to understand that we figured out something in 1998, which has been so buried from my perspective in culture that we should just be, I cannot believe we don't talk about this more. And I understand why we don't talk about it, because science would have to humble itself in front of everyone in the world. And if science humbled itself, we'd have to start asking questions. Well, if science can get things wrong and miss things so much, why is this system set up the way that it is? And then you'd have to start asking questions about why there was so much of the nobility, who were the founding peers and who came up with this idea that you should have to have peers read your research. And like, who founded the university? And oh shit, it might be the same family who did the climate. Like, what the hell? And like, we don't want to have to ask any questions about like this. Let's just keep taking photos of stuff we're never going to visit. Yay, galaxies, look at our fancy photos. Have you seen our photo of the bacteria? It's like, okay, yeah, but like, what's your grade? No, okay, I can see your evidence. You've got a photo of bacteria, dope. You can take photos of galaxies, dope. But what grade are we going to give science out of 100? Now, in 1998, we figured out that the universe was not only expanding, we found out that it was accelerating in its expansion. And because of that, and some stuff we figured out in the 1930s, science actually got graded. And we can now, for the first time in the history of science, sit down and say of everything we can measure in the world, all the atoms, all the planets, all the stuff, all the galaxies, all the dirt, all of the, like all the particles, all of that stuff. That's the stuff we're trying to use science to figure out. Like if we take all of the stuff in the universe and measure it, like we can kind of see all the stuff in the universe and we can like measure how heavy it is or whatever, something like that. It's not exactly how heavy, but like something like that. Of all the stuff we've figured out, how much of that 100 of all the stuff in the universe do you think we've figured out? And just so you know, the answer is less than 4%. Meaning, all of the stuff that we have measured or figured out right now, all the atoms, everything we can touch and deal with is only 4% of the universe. And 96% of the shit in the universe, it looks like we might not be able to interact with it. We just know it's impacting the universe. Let me say that again. Everything that you can see in the universe, all the planets, all the like atoms, all the stuff, that only adds up to about 4% of the total like energy or matter or whatever, like just the way to sparse through all of this, of the universe. 96% of it is a combination of this stuff that's making the universe accelerate in its expansion and some other stuff to do with, not gravity, but just making things not expand too much. 96% of it is a combination of dark energy and dark matter, which is just two titles for we have no idea, and we not only have no idea, we have no idea how to have an idea, and on top of that, we may never be able to have an idea. That is a physicist's true answer. What grade would you give physics out of 100? Well, at best, an incomplete, once you understand Kurt, but science at best, all of its progress, all the Nobel Prizes, everything that's ever done, at best is getting less than 4% out of 100 on its quest of knowledge. Think about the cost of that 4%, right? So like the people out there who are like 14 years old intellectually and think inventing a Latin name for some animal means you've invented a like you've given an animal a scientific name or something, and that's their real name, and that's how we track them all. But if you were an animal, you would be terrified when you got a scientific name, because people who show up with scientific names generally lead those same animals to extinction. Like the same culture that came up with the idea of a scientific name has also led more animals to extinction than probably all of the other cultures ever put together, especially if we exclude the megafauna situation. And this is what I think we should be talking about instead of just ring a rosy, we all get a Nobel Prize, don't ask any questions. Okay, so let's talk about aliens. Aliens! Yeah, aliens! Yeah, aliens are definitely real. Yeah, I saw, what's that guy's name? Rick from Rick and Morty. Yeah, he interacts with a bunch of aliens there. Yes, aliens are real. I don't know if you know that, aliens are real. Aliens. Okay, so remember what I said to you at the start. What I want to do is pretend we're in a lab and there's 7 Nobel Prize winners like sitting up on the stage, and you're a young researcher and you want some money to do some scientific research in some ideas. But here's the catch. The people on the panel have zero idea about aliens. So you're going to have to argue them into it from scratch. Now we're going to do this for both aliens and AI, because I really want you to keep asking why are we doing this? Why is this happening? Why does this keep coming up? So this is the test that we'll do. And we're going to argue as if we're at a review, right? And we're going to make them sit our science test to see whether or not they can pass our tests, all right? So here we go. So we're now in the panel. There's the 7 of us sitting at the table. We're all the Nobel Prize winners here. And this young whippersnapper has come in and they want some money, some of our taxpayer dollars, to go chase some aliens. Okay, so let's do this. All right, here we go. So here's the argument. Okay, the Earth has life on it. And all the life on the Earth walks around on the surface of the Earth. And the surface of the Earth, if you zoom out, from one perspective, is a sphere. If we look into the night sky, there are a lot of spheres in the night sky. Not all of those spheres are the same. Some of them, like our sun, put out heat. Other spheres, like our sphere, we don't put out like the sun. And we actually orbit the sun. We go around the sun from one perspective. Because again, obviously there's no observer. There's no like original observer, original viewpoint, because of some of the stuff Bert figured out. But okay, well, let's get going. Yeah, so the sphere, there's one sphere that put out the energy, and then we're in this other sphere, and we're in the right place. It's called the Goldilocks zone. You know the kid's character Goldilocks? Yeah, Goldilocks and the 3 bears. Yeah, she's here. Yeah, so basically the Earth is a sphere and the sun's a sphere, and the Earth and the sun are like this right amount of distance away from each other, that there's water. And the Earth's a sphere and it has water. And when you take photos of the night sky, there's lots of spheres that have water that are in the place where Goldilocks hangs out. And so because of that, yeah, there's a bunch of people walking around somewhere else. And there's so much probability, you know. There's like, look at how many billions of Earth-like planets there are just in the known galaxy. You just start shouting a Drake equation at people. It's not going to work with this panel champ. Okay, we want hard science. All right, okay, so that's the argument. All right, so the Earth's the sphere, and the sphere's in a good place near the sun, and there's lots of water on the sphere, and there's lots of other places like that in the universe. Ergo, must be other life somewhere else. I just do wonder about the presence of the imaginary unit in the Schrodinger equation and the Dirac equation for these people. Like, what would figuring out the axiom of choice in QFT be for aliens? How would that bit work? Don't worry about it. Okay, so that's the argument, you know what I mean? Okay, so the sphere has water. The sphere's in a good place near the sun. The Earth has life on it. Therefore, there's probably life on heaps of other spheres with water on them in a good place near their sun. All right, well, let's go through a bunch of those things. You argue that the life on the Earth came from the water. Well, that means the life has to be in the hydrogen and the oxygen. And there's hydrogen and oxygen everywhere, all around the universe. Wouldn't that mean that like anywhere where there's hydrogen or oxygen, there's technically life? If it's just the water? And if it's just because the Earth's a sphere, like who convinced you that the Earth's a sphere is a correct way to think about the Earth? Just because you've seen a photo of pale blue dot, how do you know it's actually not something unmeasurable? How do you know it's not some disturbance in the vacuum energy and we're never going to be able to measure it? Why do you think it's something to do with water and the fact that the Earth is a sphere? Again, even the argument that life only exists on the Earth and everything outside of the atmosphere of the Earth doesn't have life in it is so daft, because if you take the sun away, all the life on the Earth dies. If you take gravity away, all the life on the Earth dies. What? And also, you don't understand probability. Your own argument doesn't make any sense because you don't have a denominator yet. We don't know how rare or not rare or non-rare life on Earth, if that's even the way to think about the correct way of doing that, could or should or would be. What? So you can't say, well, no, look at all these probabilities, because again, this is just a vote. Show me a hypothesis to back any of this up. These are just votes. You're just voting that it's a sphere and that it's water and that it's a Goldilocks zone. To say that that is what helps create life here, again, that's just bias. That's survivorship bias. That's human-centric bias. Like that's not science. This is just some daft cultural arguments. That's just a bunch of votes on how you think life might work in a way that you can't justify scientifically in any way. But here's the bit, you weird, strange, like alien person. Because again, we're at a panel and they want money to like go chase this daft idea about aliens. And they're trying to argue that aliens are not woo-woo, scientific, like pseudo-scientific, made-up cultural, like hodgepodge. You know what I mean? So definitely because of all of that stuff we said out loud, just some random ass stuff about spheres and like water and random definitions and whatever. Just because of all that, and definitely not because we've just seen some pretty pictures on a screen. And definitely not because some smart people on a screen who had the NASA logo or the Harvard logo or something like that logo said some stuff that you thought sounded smart. And definitely not because we just don't want to have to ask questions about Star Wars and Marvel and SETI and Harvard and Disney and the entire future of the planet. Like, yeah, no, definitely aliens are real. But here's the best bit of this. We won't need more than 30 seconds to kick this young whippersnapper out of this like classroom and never get funding ever again, just be shadow banned, like I think we should do to Plato. Oh my gosh, that guy's such a potato. All right, Plato the potato, I can't wait for his podcast episode. It's going to be great. Can't wait for Socrates, his podcast episode. Oh, the soccer droids, we're going to have a good one on that. All right, so let's finish this. Let's just literally, with all due respect, kill the idea of aliens as a scientific idea, okay? Because here's all we need to do. Talk to me about how you would falsify your definition of aliens. Because as far as I can tell, if you think life is going to be in the Goldilocks zone in a planet that has water, in an Earth-like situation, somewhere else in the galaxy, for us to test whether or not that is true, we human beings would have to build the capability to observe every single planet in every single Goldilocks zone, in every single galaxy, in every single solar system, in every single galaxy, everywhere in the universe, every single moment there has been in a planet, from the dawn of the universe until the extinguishing of the universe. We'd have to visit every single planet in the universe, which is not possible for us to falsify this. How do we get the definitive answer? And the answer is you can't provide me with a way to get a definitive answer, which means by definition, this is not a falsifiable idea, which means by definition, this is not a scientific idea. This is a story made up to tell kids. This is not something we can test in the real world. Come on, say it with your chest, science. How do we falsify it? How do we test? And the answer is we'd have to visit every single... We can't. We can't even come close. And that's why I said you're bad at science, because you believe ideas that you can't falsify. Again, you can't even come close to trying to think about how to falsify these ideas. Right? How do we falsify your pseudoscience? It's impossible. And you don't even have any evidence. Right? You don't even have any evidence. We've already missed when we would need to start. Right? We cannot falsify this. We cannot do this. And again, just to Carl Sagan, you're right back, champ. Like extraordinary claims Like, you understand life and how the universe well enough to think that the probabilities make more sense that there's more life anywhere else. And you don't even understand the a priori assumption built into survival of the fittest, because it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the family, or survival of the fractal, or survival of the relationships. And if you just deprioritize one species and actually tell the story where the earth is at the center of the stories, rather than human beings being at the center of the stories, and you just realize that human beings are one of almost an infinitely different collection and varied forms of life that have lived down here, down throughout the ages, that some of those probability arguments can get pretty shaky, I reckon. So it's really important to understand that the difference between looking for aliens and looking for the Teletubbies, and that the difference between looking for aliens and looking for like Rick from Rick and Morty in the real world, trying to go door to door. Hey, is Rick in here? Next one. Hey, like that energy, trying to go into the forests of the world, looking for the Teletubbies, building big experiments to try and see if you can find them, trying to monitor their communications. The difference between looking for aliens, Rick, and the Teletubbies is just the NASA logo and some fancy photos of things that don't even look like that. Because when you look at photos of galaxies, that's not how they look. They have to edit them to show you what you can actually see with your eye. And the search for extraterrestrial intelligence can look forever, and it's not falsifiable, because what if they just, even if you think they are real, what if they just don't communicate electromagnetically? You're going to look forever and find nothing. Right? This is just so daft. The idea of aliens is so woo-woo. And you can keep wanting it to be real, but just so you know, that's your emotional attachment and vibes hiding in science. And arts facts don't care about your feelings. And you can be as emotional as an intellectual as you want, but you're just being an intellectual coward if you believe that even the perception or the hypothesis or the idea that we could even think about aliens being like, that's just, oh, get out of the classroom. And it's so important to understand why big business is putting this idea into our culture. Again, remember what I said in the first episode, these conversations about the future that we think are so logical. You can talk about them at the dinner table and no one thinks you're weird. Yet if we dig into them, there's nothing but smoke and mirrors. There's nothing but a bunch of vibes and a bunch of votes masquerading as science. And if we can investigate these stories, you can literally see what's really happened to this world and in this world. All right. Now, I want you to think about how successful of a conspiracy the idea of aliens is. Think about how many kids shows, TV shows, think about how many movies and books, think about how many songs reference aliens, think about the t-shirts you wear, think about the idea of a UFO, think about all of the money, all the ideas. We are literally obsessed with this idea. And if you combine this and AI, because again, I'm going to do this same episode for AI next week, because once I've done aliens and AI, I can actually show you the Trojan Horse. I can show you, hey, this is why big business do that. And it's going to change your life, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Right? If you combine all of the time, energy, effort, and money spent on both AI and space, so computers and space, they are the dominant things we think about as a culture, and they are our dominant tools for trying to make sense of the future. And these stories and those tools, they serve big business. And I'm going to show you the full argument for how they serve big business in the next episode. But just to give you a little bit of how they serve big business, just with this aliens argument, I want to show you something. And for me, I'm actually scared to show you this, because as soon as I start speaking, your Overton window is going to come up and you're going to dismiss me as an intellectual. You're going to think I'm a hippie. You're going to think I'm woo-woo. You're going to think I can't have a logical thought. You're going to think I can't lift weight or something, or like I'm a wet lettuce on the inside or something like that. No. I just know what's going to I want to talk to you about this future without you thinking that I'm woo-woo. You know what I mean? And it's so much of the viruses and the malware of big business play out to make this conversation the most difficult conversation. When from my perspective, it's the most powerful conversation. It's the most obvious conversation. And it's the thing we should be talking about the most. So as soon as I start talking about this future, it's going to trigger, right? This response is going to trigger, but please just try and get through it. Try and notice that a part of you wants to dismiss me and keep paying attention, because you should also feel some dissonance, because I've just shown you hopefully how people, very, very smart people, can believe really daft ideas. So there's no reason we shouldn't assume we can believe those same ideas. Okay, so I'm going to go really slow with you here. Okay, cool. So in the world, in our imagination, where aliens aren't real, and we take just the whole idea of aliens off the table, okay? So now we can talk about the future and what we want, what world we want our kids to grow up in, how we want the world to be, how we want the world to change over the future. We just can't talk about aliens at any point. Okay. If you are willing to do that, okay, so I just want to talk to you about the future, and we're just not going to talk about aliens as being something we need to think about. They're just not allowed to come to the table. I want to show you maybe, if you can see this, why the people who are killing the world, why this happens. Because the conversations that you're going to want to have are so ridiculously simple and powerful once you can see this future, assuming you don't dismiss me as a nerd. Okay, cool. So if we can sign a world peace treaty, you might not think that's possible, but that's okay. I'm just asking you to imagine. Don't dismiss me for thinking that out loud, that that's a woo-woo idea. And aliens are off the table, okay? And again, all I'm trying to suggest to you is imagine if all the time, energy, and effort we spent chasing aliens and AI, we instead of working on computers and space, we just instead worked on world and peace. Some pretty cool stuff. But just assume we can. I know you might think I'm woo-woo for assuming that that's possible, but just assume it. If we can sign the World Peace Treaty and aliens are off the table, this is the future of the human race. And I just really want you to sit with this, okay? And please don't dismiss this as a woo. I think this is beautiful. All right, this is our future. If we can just figure out war and we realize aliens are some daft shit invented by the people who have been like the culture who has done the most wars ever are the same culture who are obsessed with aliens. And that's not a coincidence. If we take aliens off the table and we can sign the World Peace Treaty, because once you take aliens off the table, you realize wars are stupid. Like we're literally just monkeys, like slaughtering each other for the rock, for the right to sunbake on various parts of the rock. Like, if you take aliens off the table, like we are legitimately all just like one big ass family who can't sort their own problems out. But like, if we take aliens off the table and we can sign a world peace treaty, because again, the idea of war itself is so stupid at any time, but especially when you realize aliens aren't real, it's like, what the hell are we doing here, everybody? Why don't we just calm down? We literally are all at one point, like less than 10,000 people maybe, human beings, our ancestors. All right? If we can sign the World Peace Treaty, there is roughly maybe 900, not 1,000, so not thousands, not even tens of thousands. If we don't blow up the planet and we can just sign the World Peace Treaty and aliens aren't real, human beings and our kids can continue to live and love and be in harmony here with the planet for like 900 million years. Because life will just end when the sun gets so hot, it gets a little bit hotter every year, it gets so hot it'll boil the oceans. And that's going to happen in like 1 billion years. So how come all of the politicians in the world and all the school teachers in the world aren't talking every day about the 900 million year timeline? And why are we instead talking about a 90-second timeline when that 900 million timeline is actually at risk because of our obsession with the short term? Why wasn't the first thing you were taught in kindergarten that everything to do with your education system is designed to help build this future where human beings get to continue to live and love and learn from this place and in this place for hundreds of millions of years? Why isn't every single political leader working on the World Peace Treaty to unlock this timeline? Why aren't all of the artists who make movies making movies about that timeline? Why have you seen an almost endless amount of movies about apocalypses and Armageddons and wars, and you've seen a grand total of 0 movies, TV shows, and podcasts about this 900 million year timeline? All of the artists in the world who love art, would they not want to create the art for the timeline where art can be studied and made the longest? Would they not want the most people to have that opportunity? So why aren't we talking about this? Why isn't this the predominant conversation in our culture? And the answer is because of big business. Big business don't want to think like this. Big business don't want us to see the world as this simple, to see the world as this black and white. Like literally 900 million years. And the reason we don't talk about this, and the reason this future is buried, is because of the thinkeries. It's because of universities. It's because of the fact you've got to get qualified to make art these days. Just how Plato wanted it. Plato, who of course wanted to ban and censor art. And so I can't wait to see you all in the next episode. And I just want to say thanks so much for listening to this second episode of the Starting the Wave podcast. And I'm really pumped to see you in the next episode where we're going to do the same thing for AI. And we're going to talk about this idea. I love hearing people talk about AI like it's a friend of theirs. I was like, oh yeah, when the internet came out, did you make a friendship with Amazon? Did you fall in love with eBay? Because yeah, that's just a software as a service search index. That's just what. Anyway, let's just use the words neural networks and wave our hands, and that's going to be all great. And once we've done the AI thing, I'm going to be able to start to talk to you a little bit more technically about the purpose of these Trojan horses, these stories which suck up time, energy, money in our culture to just serve big business. They don't serve the people, they don't serve the earth. And if you want to understand how the world got set on fire, understanding these stories and how they kind of play out is really the first step. So thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for giving this your time. If this has helped you at all, please feel free to share it with anyone else. Thanks so much, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye.